I didn't mean to. It was open. I only meant to.
How much did you read?
Claire, just stop.
So, the dinner in August. My idea, by the way. I picked that restaurant on purpose. It's your favorite.
I know you did.
You knew? 17, you counted.
I notice more than you think I do.
When did you get your journal without permission?
The journal was brown leather, worn at the edges, with a small gold clasp that had long since stopped locking. I'd seen it 100 times sitting on Claire's coffee table, tucked beside her reading glasses, her half-finished cups of chamomile tea, her stacks of self-help books she swore she'd finish but never did. It was just part of her apartment, part of her. I never touched it. Not once in 6 years of friendship. But that Tuesday evening in November, when Claire had stepped out to grab takeout and left me alone in her living room, the journal was open, not just cracked, open, flat on the table like it wanted to be read. I looked away, pulled out my phone, scrolled through nothing, looked back. The handwriting was hers, loopy, slanted left, the way she'd written since middle school. Blue ink. The page was dated 3 days ago. I told myself I wouldn't do this again, but every time he walks into a room, something in me just... I stopped. The word sat in my chest like a stone dropping into still water. I looked toward the front door. I could hear the elevator down the hall. She'd be back in 10 minutes, maybe 15. The Thai place was only 2 blocks away. I should have closed it. Should have walked to the window and stared at the rain on the glass until she came back. That's what a good person does. But I wasn't feeling particularly good in that moment. I sat down on the couch, set my own book aside, and I read. Her name was Claire Ashford, and she had been my best friend since the 9th grade. We'd met in AP English when she'd leaned over and whispered that our teacher's interpretation of The Great Gatsby was, quote, embarrassingly surface level. I'd laughed so hard I got sent to the hallway. We'd been inseparable ever since, through college applications and first heartbreaks, through her parents' divorce and my mother's cancer scare, through 3 cities, 4 apartments between us, and more late-night phone calls than either of us could count. Claire was the person I called when I got the job offer in Chicago and didn't know whether to take it. She was the person who drove 4 hours in a snowstorm because I texted her, "I'm not okay," at 2 a.m. She was, in every way that mattered, the most important person in my life, and she had apparently been keeping something from me for a very long time. I read for 6 pages, not scanning, reading, the way you read something when every word feels like a small earthquake. She wrote about a dinner we'd had in August, the Italian place on 5th that she'd suggested for my birthday. She wrote about how she'd almost told me something that night but lost her nerve when my ex texted and I'd spent 20 minutes looking upset at my phone. She wrote about the weekend we'd gone hiking in Vermont last spring, how she'd watched me laugh at something stupid I'd tripped over, and felt in her words like the sun had come out from behind a cloud and aimed itself specifically at her. She wrote about the night 3 years ago, New Year's Eve, when we'd both had too much champagne at her friend Dana's party and she'd almost said something on the walk home. And then the last entry, 3 days ago. I think I've been in love with him for years and I've been calling it friendship because that felt safer. Because losing him as a friend would be worse than never having him as anything more. He doesn't see it, he's never seen it. And maybe that's better. Maybe some feelings are meant to stay in leather journals with broken clasps. But God, I am so tired of pretending. I closed the journal. Sat very still. The rain hit the window in long slanted lines. The lamp in the corner threw amber light across the coffee table. Somewhere down the hall, the elevator dinged. I had 10 seconds to decide what kind of man I was going to be. The door opened. She came in with 2 paper bags, her dark hair damp from the rain, her cheeks pink from the cold. She was wearing the olive green coat I'd always thought looked good on her, and she was smiling because she'd remembered to grab the extra peanut sauce I liked without me asking. "They gave us a free spring roll," she said, holding up the bag. "I feel like this is a sign that tonight is going to be good." She stopped. She saw the journal on the table. She saw me looking at her, and in the space of 2 seconds I watched her face change, the smile sliding, something fragile and terrified moving in behind her eyes. She looked at the journal, then at me, then at the door like she was calculating whether she could leave her own apartment. "Ryan, I didn't mean to," I said. "It was open. I only meant to glance. How much did you read?" Her voice was very quiet. I didn't answer. She could tell from my face. the bag with the food lowered slowly. She set it on the counter by the door and stood there with her hands at her sides, and she looked like someone waiting to be told something they'd been dreading for years. "Claire, don't," she said. "Please don't do the thing where you're kind about it. I really cannot handle you being kind about it right now." "What thing? What do you think I'm about to say? That you love me like a sister, that I'm your best friend and you don't want to make it weird, that we're too important to each other to—" Her voice cracked. She pressed her lips together. "Just say it fast, okay? Say it and then I'll go call Dana and sleep on her couch tonight, and by Monday we can pretend this never—" "Claire." I stood up. "Stop." She stopped. The room was very quiet except for the rain. "The Vermont trip," I said. "When I tripped over that root and went down the hill and you laughed for about 5 full minutes before you helped me up." She blinked. "What about it?" "I didn't trip." I looked at her. I fell, but I fell on purpose, because you'd been quiet for 3 days and I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and the only thing I could think to do was something stupid enough to make you laugh." She stared at me. "And New Year's, Dana's party." I took a step toward her. I almost said something on the walk home. I talked myself out of it because I was sure, that it wasn't what you wanted. "You, what?" "I've been writing it off as friendship too," I said, "because that felt easier than being wrong." The paper bag rustled as she moved. She'd been gripping it without realizing. She set it down carefully, like she needed something to do with her hands. "The journal," she said. "You read all of it?" 6 pages, 6 pages, she exhaled. "Ryan, those are 6 years of feelings, I know. You can't just—" She pressed a hand to her forehead. "This isn't how this was supposed to happen. I had a whole plan, or not a plan exactly, but there were supposed to be better lighting conditions. I was going to be less damp." I laughed. I couldn't help it. And she laughed too, the way she always did when something cracked the tension, helplessly, almost against her will, covering her mouth with her hand. When she looked back at me, her eyes were wet. "What are we doing?" she said. "I think," I said, "we're being honest, maybe about 6 years too late." She crossed the room, and I met her halfway, and there was a moment, just a breath, where we stood 2 feet apart and looked at each other in the way you look at someone when you're finally done pretending. "The last line," she said softly. "You read it?" "Some feelings are meant to stay in leather journals with broken clasps," I said. "Yeah." She closed her eyes briefly. "I don't think they are," I said. We sat on the floor of her kitchen at midnight, backs against the cabinets, takeout containers between us, spring rolls gone cold. She'd lit a candle at some point, vanilla, the small one on the windowsill, and the light made everything feel like something you wanted to remember. She told me about the dinner in August. I told her about New Year's. She told me about a dozen moments I hadn't known she'd noticed. I told her about a dozen more. 6 years of carefully filed away feelings, opened like windows. "I'm terrified," she said at some point. "Just so you know, I'm not— This is terrifying." "The friendship thing? Losing it, if something goes wrong. Something could also go very right." She tilted her head and looked at me sideways, the way she always had, and something in me recognized it as a look I'd been misreading for years. "When did you get optimistic?" she said, about 10 minutes after I read your journal without permission. She laughed, and then she reached over and took my hand. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way 2 people do when they finally stop pretending there's nothing there. Outside, the rain had eased to something softer. The city kept going, indifferent and lit up and ongoing. Inside her little kitchen, something old became something new. Not perfect, not without risk, but honest. Finally, completely honest. The journal sat on the coffee table all night. Neither of us moved it. Some things deserve to stay exactly where they landed. End.